Hello, I'm Matthew Evans, Chairman of Evans Communications and a member of the ILHA board, and welcome you to our panel conversation about how luxury hotels are adapting and innovating in order to recover from and overcome the devastation caused by COVID-19 pandemic. And now I would like to invite our esteemed and accomplished panelists to introduce themselves. Daniel, why don't we start with you?
Hello, Matthew. Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Hostetler. I am the president and group managing director of the Ocean House Collection, which is a collection of ultra-luxury boutique properties in New England. And I also have the pleasure of being the president of Relais and Chateau for North America. I oversee the properties in the United States, Canada, Mexico, and the Caribbean.
Thank you. Giannis?
Hello, Matthew. My name is Giannis Sorensen. I'm the general manager of the Beaumont Hotel, a small luxury hotel in London's Mayfair.
Thank you. Kenan?
Hi, Matthew. Good morning. Glad to be here with you. My name is Kenan Simmons, and I'm the Senior Vice President of the Americas for small luxury hotels, overseeing sales, marketing, owner relations, development, and everything related to small luxury hotels in the Americas, which includes the territory from Canada, the US, Latin America, Mexico, and the Caribbean.
Thank you. And Tiffany?
Hi, good day, everyone. My name is Tiffany Cooper. I am the Senior Vice President of Development for Kimpton Hotels and Restaurants. Kimpton is an iconic boutique brand that was born just about 40 years ago in San Francisco in 1981. We have 78 beautiful little boutique hotels in 48 different cities. Nice to meet you.
Wonderful. Thank you. So before we begin, what I'd like to do, if I may, is give some facts and information that are going to context the very important subject that our panel is going to be discussing today. Firstly, for some statistics. Let's talk about COVID-19 by the numbers. As of today, total cases are over 56 million. Total deaths, 1.3 million. Active cases, almost 16 million. New cases per day, 630,000. Deaths per day, 10,000. The global cost of COVID-19, as it's estimated right now, is $28 trillion. Cost in terms of the tourism industry is 2.2 trillion, or 2.8% of global GDP. As you all know, COVID-19 has truly decimated the luxury hotel industry. Since the outbreak, luxury hotels have seen a dramatic and profound downturn in demand. Many luxury hotels around the world remain temporarily closed due to travel restrictions, lockdown, shelter-in-place policies that are there to halt the spread of coronavirus. But unfortunately, they are also severely damaging the luxury hospitality industry. To give you some context, as of this November, 58% of Manhattan's hotels remain closed, and 25% of New York City's 700 hotels are expected to close by 2023 as a result of the pandemic. Lockdown mandates caused drops in occupancy and RevPAR not seen since the Great Depression in the 1930s. Luxury hotels will take the longest to regain pre-COVID RevPAR levels by late 24 or late 2025. And occupancy is not expected to return to pre-COVID-19 levels until 2023. When we look at what's happening in terms of what the luxury traveler is doing during the pandemic and what they are looking to do post-pandemic, number one, they're all suffering from what could best be described as COVID fatigue. They want to travel. They want to be cared for. They want to be catered to, as only luxury hotels can do. But as part of that experience, they are seeking remote destinations that offer isolation, space, and privacy. They're prioritizing less crowded trips in search of vacations that provide a greater sense of calm and peacefulness. There's been a rise in what are called isolation vacations, where both the destination accommodation offers more seclusion, space, and abundance of natural beauty. There remains an intense desire amongst luxury travelers to seek out responsible ways to positively contribute to local communities through their travels. Travel that offers an intimate experience of nature and forges connections with local communities will become a bigger priority for luxury travelers going forward. There will likely be an increase in vacations at luxury hotels that allow guests to feel good and actually do good by becoming involved in local philanthropic efforts. But fundamentally today, the luxury traveler wants well-being and safety when they are traveling. In terms of some of the, if you will, innovations that luxury hotels have done, and you will hear more about this from our panels, a lot of hotels are figuring out how to deliver high touch in a contactless environment. They have all implemented very aggressive hygiene programs, protocols, policies, standards, and technologies in order to accommodate the guests of this pandemic, who are also looking for and have developed different kinds of travel that we hadn't seen before. Pod travel, private jet bundled experiences. They're seeking private villas, especially resort properties that have private villas. They're looking to reserve a floor, not just a room. They're searching for sanctuary. They're trying to figure out, in the midst of all of this, how does one do socially distanced luxury travel when, by its nature, there is an intimacy of communication between a hotel, the staff, and the guest. Staycations, a phrase that we hadn't heard fundamentally to a great degree pre-pandemic. Traveling with purpose is extremely important, in many cases more so now than it's been in the past. Despite the challenges, despite the ravages of the pandemic, the outlook for luxury travel is strong and resilient, and the overall economic recovery is predicted to be relatively swift. Experts believe that although it may take time, the luxury travel industry will bounce back post-pandemic. As affluent and ultra-affluent individuals seek luxury travel experiences to alleviate COVID fatigue, the burden is now on luxury hotels to offer guests the same sense of luxury as before the pandemic. Hotels will have to become more creative in terms of working around any restrictions that become the norm, as travelers will still expect to receive the same level of exemplary service and exceptional experience from those hotels as before COVID-19. Hotels will need to adopt and find different ways to surprise and delight their guests. So now what I'd like to do is turn it over to the panel and ask all of you some general questions and ask each of you to answer them from your particular perspective. First question, if I may. What actions have you taken, and this may be while your hotels are closed or while your hotels are open, since the onset of COVID-19, and how are your hotels doing as we go into the holiday season? If they're not open, how are you looking at when you are opening? And what are you foreseeing in terms of occupancy, ADR, and most importantly, individuals who want to come to your hotel because of COVID fatigue, but most importantly, because they want to be taken care of at a time when COVID-19 is on the rise all over the world. So let me start, if I may, with Daniel.
Sure. Well, from the beginning, I think that the approach we have taken is that luxury will be different in a COVID world, but it wouldn't be less than it was before. So we are quite fortunate, first of all, to be doing very well. We benefit from the fact that Our collection in New England is within the drive market of New York and Boston and Fairfield County, Connecticut, which are all great markets for us, and people want to get out of the cities. Even more so we're seeing as we get to the winter time. So our properties have all done quite well. They're smaller, and I think there's a level of trust in independent properties and people's willingness to get out of the city. So we've done well. What are we doing different? We're taking an entirely different approach and sort of putting the onus on the guest. I think that there was a large opportunity or our asset manager, who I love dearly, was a big proponent of dumb down the service. People are going to have lower expectations, even in luxury. And I took a completely different approach, which was we are going to put the onus on the guest, but we're going to keep the level of service where it always has been. So we, for instance, are still offering twice daily maid service, but if the guest wants once daily maid service, we'll do that. If they want no maid service, we will do that. If you want room service delivered in your room as it traditionally has been, we'll do that, but we'll also stop at the door and hand over the cart for you. So at every step of the way, we are trying to say, we'll deliver the level of service we always have, obviously with COVID best practices at the time, but we will also allow the guests to change the level of service to what is comfortable for them, because I think every guest has a different view of what their comfort level is and what their expectation of luxury in the COVID era is.
Now, Tiffany, same question, especially given the, how Kimpton has such a close connection with guests. What has Kimpton done since the onset of COVID, and how are you looking at the upcoming holiday season and beyond in terms of what Kimpton is doing to adapt and innovate?
Yeah, so I think I think that everyone does have a different risk profile with COVID. Kimpton as a brand, we are so focused on these unscripted exchanges and connections with our guests, and I think in this age of COVID, I think there's been just a kind of a strip down of reality. So being mindful that everyone is having a different experience as they're walking through our doors, I think that's important. And as a brand, we've always worked so hard to connect with our guests on a very heartfelt level. So I think that's more important now than ever. Of course, you have now this socially distanced space and you have these masks. So we've been, I think the operative word in all of this is creativity and trying to really kind of bring forth creative ways to bring that unique experience to our guests. We're much more, I'd say, inclusive. We take an inclusive approach to luxury. So there's nothing really that formal about what we do. It's much more organic. So, a lot of our front office agents have placed photos of themselves on the front desk smiling, because we still want to show people our happy, smiling faces and kind of bring forth that warmth. There's some guests that still want to exchange with our employees, and there's some that really want to be hands off. We've had a texting program called Kipsu that we've had for years, and it's worked really well. So some guests want to have more of that texting relationship where they're asking for recommendations in city centers of where to go to eat or what to do. But we've seen a lot of connection even from a technology standpoint, where people are texting photos back and forth of what they're doing around town. So that's been, I guess, one of the opportunities that we've seen for such a hands-on brand. I also think that just empowering our teams more than ever to do what makes sense for their property. We have some properties that are doing extremely well. We just opened a hotel in Bozeman and near Yellowstone, which has been I think, almost full occupancy since opening. And then we have other properties in urban areas that are running much lower occupancy. So I think it's really a market to market issue and opportunity. And so really making sure our guests and our employees can give them those great experiences, whether they're at 10% occupancy or, almost nearing 100% occupancy in some cases.
Now, Giannis, the Beaumont is closed, but you talk about a property that has an extraordinary reputation for building very, very intimate relationships with guests. How are you preparing to reopen? Which and at a time which may still be when we're all in the midst of the pandemic.
Yes, Matthew, as you said, the hotel is closed on the 23rd of March, and we're using the time at the moment to do some great improvement works to the existing hotel, and also breaking ground on an extension of 25 rooms just in the building next to the hotel. So we anticipate at the moment an opening sort of late spring next year, hopefully by the time where we can walk around the city without a mask on our face. It resonates with me what Tiffany and Daniel said. I very much agree with a very individual, reactive approach rather than dictating formulas for guests. I think people have a very different way of how they perceive the threat of COVID. One of the things that I found very interesting when this whole pandemic started was this immediate need to make sense of it as hoteliers. I think we're so used to finding solutions to problems. We love putting timelines to things. And it was a very humbling experience of how the situation actually evolved and how the industry is forced to continue to listen, to adapt, to listen to the science, to update their protocols, and to best respond to the situation. And that's something that we follow. We're ready to open. We could potentially open from our protocol standpoint next week. But I know that by the time we will actually open, we will have revised that a couple of times. One thing that I wanted to mention is that we have been very mindful of the way we communicate. I feel very often when you communicate, you always need to think about who you're communicating to. And especially in that pandemic, a lot of people really encountered severe hardship. And we are very careful in not to over communicate or not be too broad in our communication message, but we spend a lot of time to get in touch with guests individually and to really listen in and to allow people also a little bit of time and space rather than over communicating from our side. And that has been very well received. As you said, we have incredibly close relationships with our guests, and this measured approach, and also, to an extent recognize that a 5-star hotel in the city might not be on top of their priority list, and finding your right position in their lives and communicating very subtly was very important for us and will remain very important.
Now, Kenan, Small Luxury Hotels is a collection of some of the finest hotels in the world, but you go from properties that have a very few keys up to several hundred keys. How are you finding that your hotels are dealing with COVID-19 and how they're preparing to deal with it going into the holiday season and the new year?
I think it's different depending on which destination you're in, Matthew. We're in over 80 countries at the moment. So obviously all the hotels are following, local mandates, what they have to do as far as opening and social distancing and what have you. We as a brand partnered with a company called GBAC, which provides certification for cleanliness, safety, infectious disease prevention. But we have to remember, we're in the business of luxury hotels. Our hotels were perceived to be clean and safe even pre-COVID. So again, it's giving them or giving the guest, that extra level of comfort knowing that a hotel is certified by an organization like GBAC. GBAC is doing a lot of other hotel brands such as Hyatt and several others. Again, I think it's really to give the customer the comfort knowing that the hotel is meeting a certain standard. But I think something that both Daniel touched on earlier about leaving it up to the guest, that's I think is very important. But it's also, we have to retrain our staff, because I think there's 3 levels of guests that you're seeing. You're seeing the person who's coming in and is very, very cautious about COVID. They want the mask. They want to be 6 feet away. They want to be, far away from any other room. Then you have the guest that's really there. They want some of the touch points as they had pre-COVID, but they'll follow all the protocols. And then you have the far extreme, the people who come in, they don't want to wear masks. They don't want to follow protocols. So, we have to retrain our staff how to approach these different guests tactfully, but also the way they want to be approached. You talk about going into, the holiday season and what we're seeing. I mean, it's a lot different in different parts of the world. City center hotels obviously are feeling the pain much greater than some of these, smaller resorts and drive markets. We're seeing the Caribbean start to open. What I think, though, is it's very, very hard to forecast going into this. One being that the situation with COVID is changing so rapidly, and that hotels are trying to adapt and, give the opportunity for generous cancellation policies while you're trying to maximize, the amount of guests that you have on property during the holiday season. So it's kind of a mixed bag depending on where you are.
So I think one of the things that was inspiring for me in speaking with all of you before the panel is that you all looked at what is a very tragic time in our society and in our world. But you were all extremely optimistic about luxury hospitality, both individually and collectively, being able to transform adversity into opportunity. Let's talk a little bit about that. And Giannis, if I may, let me start with you. How are you approaching not simply dealing with the challenges of this pandemic, but how do you see actually transforming the adversity that's caused by COVID-19 into an opportunity for the Beaumont?
Well, I have to say we've taken a very practical approach, and luckily being supported by a wonderful owner who has a very long-term vision and who realizes that this crisis will come to an end eventually. So we have had the opportunity to not only retain the entire team during this closure, but also start really looking at areas where we can right now, while the hotel is closed, improve the areas, start working on the renovations on the building next door, to then be ready when hopefully travel and international travel will rebound strongly into London come Q2, Q3. So it's really the opportunity, as I mentioned, to remain in touch with your guests, remain in touch with your team, and prepare for the time after it. But don't leave that time unused. But right now, we really, I think it's a contractor's dream. There's no clients. We're not concerned about noise. We can really get on with things very pragmatic and very quick to offer great enhancements when we reopen our doors.
And Tiffany, same question for you. How is Kimpton approaching transforming adversity into opportunity?
Well, what's interesting is that I know that obviously this is an extreme example of a downturn for our industry. This is my third one, starting with 9/11 and the .com bubble bursting, and then 2008. So this is obviously much more dramatic and deeper. But I think in times like this, there's two people. There are people that just become frozen by the chaos. And then there's those that look for the opportunity within the crisis. And I think if you look at the most recent downturn, we had some really remarkable innovation that came out of that with all of the disruptors. I think it gives us an opportunity to be more inventive and a little bit more nimble. I think ultimately the consumer benefits from that. And then there can also be some, bottom line. There's more of a bottom line focus in addition to those innovations. So I think trying to have a longer term perspective, and really kind of focus on what things are going to look like in 2024, 2025. I am not of the opinion that this is, we're going to fundamentally change the way we travel. I do think that there's going to be some different habits that are formed from this. I think there's going to obviously be shorter booking windows, so people may not be booking a vacation 18 months out. They may be wanting to just, go in 60 to 90 days. But, Wandermust has replaced Wanderlust. And I think that we've taken travel for granted. And I think people want to travel again. They want joy, they want fun, they want connection. And I think once everyone does start traveling again, there's going to be a newfound sense of gratitude. I think there's going to be, this whole work from home is leading people to a more transient work experience where there will be more workcations and people will be able to work from different locations. So, I think that right now these are, extremely challenging times for so many of us, but being able to kind of have a longer term view as to where we're going to be at in the next few years, I think that's really, really critical to also be mindful of as we're trying to navigate our path forward.
And Kenan, obviously, because of the unique nature of the SLH portfolio, I suspect there are a lot of ways that the properties are transforming adversity into opportunity. What have you seen that particularly that resonated with you, and that you think is something that will serve as an example for the entire luxury hospitality industry?
Well, I think if you look at the space of small independent hotels, they've always had to transform and innovate to stay competitive and stay ahead of the curve. They may not necessarily have the resources, that some of the bigger branded or some of the bigger box hotels have. So they always had to be nimble. So when COVID hit, and looking at ways to do business and way to offer various services, they didn't have a lot of red tape to cut through to do things differently. So whether it's moving dining outside, so rather than reserving your table, you're reserving your location on the property for dinner that night, whether it's in the garden or by the pool or on the beach. So it's really, transforming how you offer food and beverage. It could be in room, that they've never done before, or in cabin. It's utilizing what you have to your ability to deliver, a great experience for the guest. And again, I think it depends on where you are and the space that you have. But I think, all of our hotels adapted pretty well and pretty quickly. The biggest challenge, though, again, for a lot of the hotels is, with the local regulations. Some of them opened and then all of a sudden 4 weeks later they have to close. Then you reopen. We have places like in Tulum, Mexico, for example. They reopened and they brought half their staff back, and next thing you know, reservations are going through the roof. And I was on a call with an owner yesterday in Tulum, and he said Tulum is back to where it was in November of 2019 as far as business levels. So, there's that balance of, how do you manage not only your business and transform how you're delivering to the guests, but then also managing your services and then obviously staffing levels as well.
Thank you, Daniel. One of the things that you and I had talked about was for instance, how you were adapting and innovating some of the services you were providing in terms of everything from how you were taking care of a guest on the beach. You are constantly pushing the envelope when it comes to innovation. How are you doing it now, specifically because of COVID, and what you're doing on your own properties? How are you trying to encourage Relais and Chateau properties to use those same examples and interpret them in their own way?
Well, I think that from a guest perspective, we analyzed every moment of the guest experience from arrival to departure and every point in between. And, we looked at things, as Keenan was saying, about, taking a riff on a doorknob menu and allowing the guest to choose the location that they wanted to dine, the menu, the alcohol choice, and having that table set out for them when they arrived so that they could dine without staff. We knew our bars were going to be closed. So we had a custom-made bar cart that is in the same leather as the bar stools in our bar, and it goes door to door every evening and offers complimentary canapes, and then they'll sell you a $20 craft cocktail there at your door, because the theory was that people still wanted to have cocktails. I think, to everyone else's point, I looked at this as a strategic opportunity, because I felt like there was going to be a tendency to cut service, and there was going to be a tendency to cut staff. And by doing what Giannis said, by maintaining all of our staff, by communicating with them weekly while we were closed, by offering them zero interest loans, we became the employer of choice. And we've gone to reopen and hire some great people, because we knew that there would be some great people in our industry that were unemployed. We took a look at our travel agent partners, and we really drilled in on the ones in New York and Boston that traditionally don't do the drive market. They're sending their guests to the Caribbean, they're sending their guests to Europe. And we knew that they too were hurting like the hoteliers, and we needed to offer a product to them that was in the drive market, because their clients that were very loyal to them were going to come to them and say, where should we go? We can't go to Europe this year. So we really dug deep into that market, and then, obviously communicating with our guests, and as Giannis said, taking that long-term approach for those of us who have the luxury of not necessarily worrying so much as the bottom line for 2020, but looking at this as a 2020, 2021, 2022 experience, that if we could deliver that customized level of service for the guest and introduce ourselves to a new market of travel agents, this was going to have a long-term positive approach on the properties. And from a Relais and Chateau standpoint, again, weekly Zoom calls with the 88 properties in North America, because I found that more than ever, we're always friendly competitors. One thing that COVID has done is really brought a community sense to this pandemic, and we were a sharing of information and trying to figure out how we can benefit, how we can share staff with the properties in the cities that maybe weren't open yet. To Keenan's point, we opened to a very high occupancy that maybe we weren't quite ready for during the pandemic. So shifting staff among the different properties, but really, again, looking at this as a long-term strategic opportunity.
And Matthew, if I could just interrupt real quick,
please.
I think when Daniel talks about the bar cart and some of these cool innovations that hotels are coming up with, during COVID, I think what we're going to have to be cognizant about is, not just taking them away after it's over, because some of these things that hotels are doing and innovating with are really going to resonate with the guests. So I think, tracking what they felt was great and continuing on afterwards, because I think, like you said, we are all coming up with great innovations, and some of them, are not going to go away, or the guest isn't going to want to go away.
Well, especially because we're creating an expectation, and all of a sudden you can't then change the expectation just because COVID dissipates. So I wholeheartedly agree. What I'd like to do is drill down a little bit to something, and I think, Tiffany, you used the phrase empowering the team. And I think we all know that the greatest art form of luxury hospitality is delivered by the staff. It's, when a guest leaves a wonderful luxury hotel, they remember the experiences they had with the staff. how are all of you dealing with reassuring the staff during what is a very difficult time for them, for their families, for their loved ones, emotionally, financially? How are you helping the staff? How are you guiding the staff in terms of engaging with the guest in what is ostensibly a contactless environment? What are you seeing that will stay with us post-COVID in terms of staff relations, staff empowerment, and staff engagement? So, Tiffany, if I may, let me start with you.
Sure. So, I would say that our Kimpton culture is the most important aspect of our brand. I think if you spoke with our guests, that would be the number one number one thing that they love the most is the engagement with our teams. And so, they truly are, they're the heart of our business. They're the heart of the house. So I don't know that we, I think in some ways our brand was built for this time because we lead with heart already. And so, I don't know that we would change anything in terms of how we interact with our guests. I think that just from a leadership perspective and corporate office perspective, being able to stay super connected to them is more critical than ever. We've been hosting morning coffee chats and little wine hours, and we've been trying to keep them engaged with sharing, silly, awkward family photos or learning hidden talents about each other to keep each other laughing and trying to keep the morale up. But, these are incredibly challenging times for us. And so I think we are really trying to view everything through the lens of compassion and empathy. Being able to offer programs through our corporate office that provide resources, emotional well-being, or financial assistance, I think is really important. We've also offered our teams at-home tutoring for those with kids at home that are doing that are learning remotely. So we have programs that will allow parents and students to access virtual tutoring and education programs and college coaching. And so I think those having those resources available are critical, but just how we approach our guests or our employees and knowing that everyone is coming in with a different set of challenges in these times. I think we have to be extremely mindful about that when we're interacting with our teams.
Daniel, same question.
Like Tiffany, I think that our staff, by virtue of the 5-star properties that we manage already, are all about the guest experience and customizing that guest experience. I think we really concentrated on constant communication with the staff, a weekly Zoom meeting while we were closed to update them on what was going on, even though sometimes the update was simply, we don't know what's going on, because I think that they wanted that genuine leadership of, but we have a plan. This is what the sales team is doing. We had guest lectures every week on subjects from COVID to training, to just constantly communicate with the staff and take care of them. And we too, as Tiffany said, we had a series of, wine education classes 3 days a week that our wine director did. We had cooking classes 3 days a week that the chef did that you could Zoom into in the evening to get together with your colleagues. I think since we've opened, we've tried to keep to the norm as much as possible, hold the company picnic in a socially distanced way. Movie theaters are empty, so renting movie theaters and showing a movie that because people want to get out and doing that for the team. While we were closed, we were deploying our food truck into the community, and the staff was volunteering to be on the food truck, taking care of meals that students would normally be getting at the public schools that they weren't getting. So that sense of camaraderie and keeping in constant communication with the team, because they are literally the ones that are delivering the 5-star service to the guest on a daily basis, not the 4 of us sitting here. So it's our job to support the team and really figure out what they need, because these are very scary times.
And Giannis, you're closed. How are you maintaining the engagement with the staff, and how are you? What are you doing to prepare them for when the Beaumont reopens?
I think it's a very interesting discussion. I think what we've seen in hospitality, a trend we've seen, is that it's so much more about stakeholder value right now, and not only about shareholder value. And I think that the shareholder value is more and more driven by stakeholder value. And I think in many ways, COVID, even though it's not the new normal, I think it's sort of a state that we're all in for a certain amount of time. I don't think that a lot of these procedural changes that we've seen right now are here to stay. I think the needs that people have don't change because of a pandemic, and we'll go back to it. But they're emphasized, and I think that's really interesting. And the way we talk about our staff and the need to look at our staff is actually nothing new. It's whatever held the culture together. And I think it's in a sense positive that this crisis has brought that element of team spirit and that need to look after one another more to the forefront. And as we do with our guests, it's not one fits all. What we've done here at the hotel is that we have a lot of offering and a lot of different initiatives, and that starts with quiz nights and meetings that we do and drinks receptions that we do, and we meditate once a day. And do I have 100 people meditating every morning with me? No, it's 5-6 people. But it's not that everything is good for everybody. And I think that as much as we have understood that for our guests, we understand that for our staff as well. And it's important to offer the option and offer the alternative to engage, find the right channel of how people feel comfortable to engage, and understand. I mean, we've been with the executive team. We don't look at our team as the team. We look at them as individuals, and we really look at what is their support network? How's the family situation look? Where do they live? Who are they in touch with? And we all know that we do need more support at different times, and some people need more support than others. And I think it's very important to be very specific of how do you support whom during this crisis, and at what point and how much. And again, not have a broad stroke of an offering and an event schedule. But somebody once said, when you ask somebody how they're doing, be prepared that somebody actually gives you an answer. And I think that's really important to really create the space for people to share how they're feeling, and to find the right communication channels for people to be able to express it. And with the socially distanced environment that we have, that's not always easy. So it's about the offering, and it's about a continuous follow-up. And that's how we've managed it here at the hotel. And, we do are quite optimistic. I think we've all seen the news about the vaccine trials, and the Oxford vaccine is going to announce something in the next 1 or 2 weeks. And I do feel that I'm more positive now than I've been for many months. And I think as much as obviously any vaccine is not going to help Q4 and Q1, I think that, as Tiffany also said, fundamentally luxury hospitality is not going to change. The need of people wanting to see people and interact with people, that's what makes this industry so special. And we're not going to do away with that. We need to see how we hold it together during the crisis and come out on the other end stronger as a team and not dismantled.
And Kenan, when you look at the myriad of properties in SLH, same question from the standpoint of what are you seeing that they're doing to maintain, enhance the relationships with staff, but also give staff the skills that they need to engage the guest in a more intimate way, despite the fact that we're in a contactless environment?
No, I mean, I would agree with most of my colleagues and everything they said. It's really keeping the lines of communication open, keeping the ongoing training. Sometimes it's hard to train in situations like this because obviously your staffing levels are lower in some cases, or you're not open. So it's tough to keep that momentum going, which they are all trying to do. The one thing that I've been thinking about lately, and I think as an industry, it's gonna come to the forefront in the next year or two when things do start to normalize a bit. Is our industry has been so decimated by COVID, and a lot of good people, for no fault of their own, were either furloughed, laid off, or lose their jobs. And these people have had to pivot to other jobs, other industries, and we as an industry, we're really struggling to find good people pre-COVID. So all these people that may transition out of the industry, what are we going to do, post-COVID to bring some of them back? Because some of them may feel that, what, I can make the same amount of money. I can, obviously the industry is long hours, very hard work. Are they going to want to come back? And I think that's something we're all going to be faced with in the future.
Agreed. I would be remiss if I didn't ask a question about how each of you and your organizations are dealing with the financial devastation and ramifications of COVID-19. And Daniel, I'm going to ask you to tackle this one first, because you had referenced in a conversation with me about the asset manager's approach. How are you dealing with the financial challenges, and how are you advising Relais and Chateau properties to deal with them?
Well, again, I think I said it earlier. I think that there is a tendency to cut everything to try and get as close to your NOI for 2020 as you can get. And I personally take a more long-term approach and advise a more long-term approach, that what we do this year during COVID, the way we care for our guests, the way we care for our travel agent partners, the way we care for our associates is going to have a long-term ramification. And I think those of us that use this as an opportunity to not slash and burn and deliver that same level of service and care for our teams and our partners are going to recover a lot faster than some of those more bottom line driven big box competitors that we all work with.
Okay. And Giannis, if I may, same question for you, because you're also taking advantage of this time to do some work in the hotel itself. But how are you dealing with the financial challenges, and how do you anticipate dealing with them once the hotel reopens?
Well, I much share what Daniel says, to see this period more as an opportunity to take stock, to look at how we invest in the future, because this current crisis is not here to stay, but we'll overcome it. But at the same time, I'm sitting here in my office managing a renovation project and a building project with an owner who has a long-term vision and looks after my team. I'm in an incredible fortunate position, and I do recognize, and I'm quite sensitive, when I speak to people, is not everybody is in that fortunate position, and cash flow is king in this crisis. And as much as some people want to take the long-term view, they just can't. I think the last 10 years, hospitality has seen an absolute rise in investment, and a lot of companies are highly leveraged and projects are highly leveraged. And that is the downfall often at the moment when people look at short-term crises. So I much agree, if possible, not to cut the cords, because this is a long-term game. And I much agree with Keenan said about the employment. In London, we had a real employment crisis. In 2019, we have Brexit, obviously, that has happened. The transition period is coming to an end in a month. We still don't know what's going to happen. And arguably, the EU workers, the low-skilled workers, we can't even get work permits for them as it stands now. So we're in an employment crisis now that hotels have to let people go. And arguably in a year from now, we're not going to know how to operate these hotels, because we won't have enough staff to welcome our guests. So it's a catch-22 for some. And I think it's important to recognize that, as much I think that everybody who works in this industry will put people first. But I do recognize as well that not everybody is able to support the short term. And I think as much as one can lobby for it and try to show projections, not for 6 months, but potentially for a year and a half or 2 years, on the long term, it will definitely be worth the investment. But it's difficult out there. And I think a lot of people had to make very difficult decisions, knowing that long term it's not the right decision, but being forced to do so. And as I said, I'm very fortunate that I can make the right decision, and I'm being enabled to make the right decision.
And Kenan, obviously, I think you must be dealing with a number of the SLH hotels with a myriad of financial challenges. What advice, what guidance, what insights is SLH giving your members as to how to deal with the financial challenges caused by COVID-19?
You know, I think each hotel has their challenges and issues to deal with it. I mean, us as a company, we're not highly leveraged. We're capitalized pretty well. But what we've been doing is really taking a softer approach. If a hotel, for whatever can't meet their financial obligation to us, instead of just saying, all right, we're going to cut the cord and go their own way and throw it to legal to pay the bills, we're working with the hotels. All right, you know what? This year you didn't open. Maybe we just add another year onto your existing agreement. Can you do a payment plan if you're open and you can't afford the full fees at the moment? So it's really looking at each individual hotel on a case-by-case basis when they are having these issues. We had certain hotels that said, you know what, listen, I'm not going to see any sort of cash until April. We said, okay, you know what, we'll put that on the back burner, and when business starts getting better, obviously we can have that conversation with them then, because the feeling is if you're looking at it from a long view, we want to keep as many hotels within the portfolio as we can. So obviously that's what we're doing, and making sure that they can come out of this, in a good situation as well, rather than just cutting them off and looking at it from a short-term point of view.
And Tiffany, from a financial perspective, how are you helping your properties manage through this? But also, how are you giving them guidance, because F&B plays such a significant role in Kimpton? How are you helping them both from a overall financial standpoint, but also dealing with some of the food and beverage challenges, financial challenges caused by COVID?
Yeah, so what's interesting about Kimpton is we're a big brand and we're an operator, but we grew out of being an owner and a developer. I mean, the first 35 years of our existence, we were the owner and developer. So we have, a great empathy for our owners, and I think our ownership community would echo that. So we really have worked hard to be flexible, as Keenan was saying, with some of the construction deadlines or renovation deadlines, trying to work with them on a one-by-one basis. But we've also looked at our own corporate structure, and we've launched a tiered commercial services program, which is more of a pod format that allows some cost savings, but also some revenue opportunities. And so this is something that we feel that will likely have legs even beyond COVID. So this is an innovation and us being nimble for our owners that I think that they can really benefit from. We have this, crawl, walk, run program where there's different services that different ownership groups can play with. But there's going to be some groups that may not be able to cover debt service and may not be able to crawl out of. And as a brand, as an operator, we're going to do our best to work with those groups and those properties. They're all our children, and we don't want to lose any of them. On the R&B, Kimpton is R&B rather than F&B. On R&B, we're looking at different ways that we can, I guess, view restaurants a little differently. But again, going back to empowering our teams and trying to unleash creativity, we've had some really, I think, fun ideas that have come of all of this. So one of our hotels in Denver, the Bourne, they purchased these igloos, and they've set them outside on the upper deck where they can host small groups of 6 people, and they can have a 5-course prefix dinner, and there's a bar cart, and that's something that we see having legs beyond COVID. Our social hour, which Kimpton is known for in the evening, it looks different, but now we have our guests that can grab a glass of wine, and then they can tour around the hotel and do a little treasure hunt. So there are opportunities. It clearly is a different world right now in restaurants and bars, but and we think it's going to return to norms, at some point. But I do think that there's creative ways that we can still have fun and engage with our guests.
So let's stay on that for a minute, which is, if one were to define luxury hospitality by any particular phrase, it would be the guest experience. And when you think of who is sitting in and watching our panel, they're all asking a fundamental question of how, in this very difficult and trying time, do we facilitate, enhance, and redefine the guest experience at a time where the guest is expecting all of us to do so? So, Daniel, if I may, let me start with you, especially at a time where everybody's wearing masks and we can't make the kind of intimate contact that we have in the past because of social distancing. How are you looking to redefine and enhance the guest experience?
I think really working on what Tiffany just said, the creativity and the personalization of the guest experience. We had a lot of these outdoor venues during the summertime. We were fortunate our properties are along the coast. And how do we do that as people want to have to come indoors, or it gets too cold in the wintertime? One of our properties has ski gondolas that we brought in, and they are intimate dining experiences like the igloos Tiffany spoke about, where you can have sort of a European après-ski 4 to 6 person dinner. At our Weekapaug Inn, we took the swimming pool and put up Christmas trees and strung Christmas lights, and we're using the lounge chairs, and we tuck the guests in with electric blankets, and we bring them a TV dinner, which is, lobster, macaroni, and cheese and things like that. It's gourmet, but it's in a bento box. It's creating these individualized experiences for guests so that they still can come and have a luxury experience, because to your point earlier, it is isolation vacations. They are traveling with their families or in pods. And so you want to create those venues where they feel safe. And at the same time, we still have our indoor fine dining venues. They are obviously socially distanced and the staff is wearing gloves and masks. But we have found that our markets in New York and Connecticut and Boston, there is no fine dining in those cities at the moment. And people still have special occasions and want to have a fine dining experience. And they are busier than ever. So I think, again, reading the level of guest and how they feel about their risk perspective, and creating different opportunities for them on each of the properties. I think Patrick O'Connell at the Inn at Little Washington, which is one of our relay properties, made national news. He put dummies at the tables that, from stage dummies at all of the tables that were socially distanced, so that you would still feel like you were in a room full of people when you were having dinner. That sort of creative approach is, I think, what we independent properties do a whole lot better than some of the big box properties. And that's our differentiation point during all of this.
Kenan, same question. How are you seeing SLH properties enhance, redefine, and raise the bar in terms of the guest experience?
I think it's, again, echoing what Daniel said, it's more redefining and coming up with new ideas. All of these small independently owned properties, they were doing this way before COVID even happened. But what they now have to do is adapt it to meet the protocols in a given location. So it's just retooling what they're doing and coming up with some of these fun, unique ideas that are going to resonate with their guests. I don't think it's creating, it's reinventing the wheels for some of these hotels. It's just looking at things a little bit differently and how it can adapt to the restrictions that they have. And I think what Daniel pointed out, about New York not having fine dining, a good friend of mine, he runs it's actually a Relais and Chateau Michelin star restaurant here in San Diego called Addison. And what he said, which was interesting, he said, there's no sort of Michelin restaurant open in LA at the moment. There's very few that are open in San Francisco, with the exception of Napa. So he's had to really repivot and go after new guests. And he said the uptick that he has seen from people who are just craving this and will drive an hour and a half, 2 hours just for dinner. So again, it's looking at business a little bit differently, but also looking at your markets a little bit differently. We saw this in the summer months where, Italian hotels, which relied on 50% American business year after year, now face the fact that, Americans couldn't travel to Italy. So they turned to us and said, all right, let's look at the database in the UK, Spain, in Italy itself, to really attract new guests. So it's repivoting to who your customer is.
Giannis, same question.
Yeah, I much agree with what Kenan and Daniel said. And I think that we're all benefit to an extent, and speaking to colleagues that have hotels that are operating, that the people who are traveling, they're actually very curious and they feel quite comfortable traveling. The people who are very cautious and who are afraid to travel, they're very likely not to travel anyways, or they travel only when they have to on business, and then they stay away from these activities. But I think there has been some great initiatives from hotels that are open, lots of creativity, and I've heard and spoken to many clients who have been in some of the smaller individual hotels who have done these creative sort of reconstructing part of their business model, and they've engaged with it and they've loved it. And I think a lot of hotels have actually created strong bonds during this period with some of the clients that have sort of followed them on this path to make the best out of that situation and be creative and do with what you have. And as we sat on this panel before, it's something that is not new to individual and independent hotels. We constantly look at the market and see, how things are shifting and where the opportunities lie and how we can create these experiences that guests can engage with.
And if I can jump onto what Giannis said, I think he just made the case for that long-term approach. There's the guest that can travel today and is happy to do that. And they are all speaking to that guest who is not ready to travel today and will be in 2021. And that's the second wave of this sort of looking at this long-term approach.
Tiffany, last word on guest experience.
Look, I think it comes down to grassroots, kind of back to basics. I think it comes down to connection on a real authentic level. I think it comes down to training our employees to ebb and flow in these challenging times. I think as leaders, we need to be more empathetic than ever, and we need to listen and we need to be responsive. But it's not what happens to you, it's how you approach it. And I think that all of us, I'm very thankful to have been asked to be on this panel with this group, because I don't know that all brands view the world in a similar way that we do in terms of, creativity and innovation. And so I'm thankful to be at Kimpton because I think this is really who we've always been as a company, and it just is, we're being asked to continue to up our game during these unprecedented times. But we'll rise to the challenge, and we'll come out of this. I think stronger and better, and with a lot more innovation and creative ideas. But I'm an optimist. I'm a development person, so we're the eternal optimists anyway.
Well, I think in the world of luxury hospitality and luxury hotels, we have to be optimistic because fundamentally we're in the business of making a difference in the lives of our staff, of our guests, and part of that means being optimistic. I think we're getting close to our allotted time. So what I would ask each of you is last thoughts. When you think of the individuals that are watching this panel today, what advice can you give the owners, the operators, the management, the developers of luxury hotels in this most challenging but also potentially opportunistic time? So if I can, I'd like to go, like each of you to give your thoughts and suggestions to those individuals. Kenan, let me start with you.
I think it's really stay the course. I think now we are starting to see, the light at the end of the tunnel, so to say, with, some of these vaccines proving to be effective. And then, the therapeutics that are coming out. But also, going forward, I think hotels are really going to have to choose the right partners they work with, who can deliver them the right guest, who can reach the right guest. I mean, this isn't a self-serving plug for SLH, but I think hotels are going to have to do more with less. So I think, particularly for the independent hotel, whether it's us, whether it's Leading, whether it's Relais and Chateau, we all offer different things to different types of hotels. So I think, as we start to move out of it in hotels, whether they don't have the financial resources now or going forward, pick your partners right. Who can reach the right customer for me? Who aligns with my vision and my brand? And keep moving and innovating like we've all just been talking about for the past hour.
Tiffany?
I just think we need to have obviously we need to get through these times, but I think we really want to focus on what do we want to look like in 2022, 2023? What can we do now to be ready? If I asked everyone that in 2008 and 2009, what would you have said? So there will be opportunities, and how can you prepare now? What tools can you sharpen? What can you read? How can you be a better leader? How can you be a better team member? I mean, I think now gives us we have a little bit more time on our hands, unfortunately. So really, I guess, sharpening our own personal tools to be our personal best and bringing that to each other every day.
Giannis?
2 points, really. I think, as we said, this pandemic has accelerated some trends and sort of crystallized certain trends. And I think one of them is a rapid growth in technology and how technology enters the hospitality space. And I think what we should not forget is that hospitality is about people, and it's about real people and real experiences. And I feel at the moment, sometimes technology competes with the human element and it replaces the human element. And I think we need to be really mindful that when we are able to eliminate processes and transactions that have never served a purpose in hotels, taking credit cards, check-in procedures. Nobody ever came to a hotel before that. If we can take the transactions out of the experience through technology, I think we should embrace that and we shouldn't push it away. But we should not replace what only humans can do, because we now have technology that can manage the process. This frees up people to do what only people can do. And I think when people will travel in the luxury space, they'll travel for relationship. I think in many ways, we always talk about the home, and it's not so much that we want to find the home in a hotel. We want to find how we want home to be. And because home isn't always perfect, is it? We want the perfect home, and technology doesn't create the perfect home. It's real people and real experiences. So technology is not so much of what can it do, but what do I want it to do for me? And I think for now, we're only, like every upgrade, we're always taking it. And we need to be managing technology rather than it managing us. The other thing I wanted to leave everybody with is that I feel, as much as COVID has impacted all of our lives, and there's so much hardship out there, this crisis is coming to an end, and I'm more hopeful today than I was for many months. But there is a far bigger crisis out there, and it's called climate change. And this is the much bigger threat to our industry, and we're not panicked, and I'm panicked. It will impact all of our businesses, and it already does, but it doesn't take the headlines. And I feel hotels need to turn into places that actually contribute, and where you allow clients to contribute, but you don't force them to compromise. I think gone are the days where you say, our showers, don't have a lot of water flow, or please don't change your towels or your bed linen. That's like asking people to donate money for your good cause. I think what is so important right now, that hotels become places where any hotel that is built needs to be built with sustainability front and center. How do you generate energy? Do you have a carbon neutral or carbon positive buildings? What are the materials that you use? Do you have plastic bottles or solid shampoos? What is your purchasing manifesto? How do you manage waste? You want a client to be good to the environment because they stay with you, but you don't want them to compromise during their stay to be good to the environment. I think that's a really important change that we need to see. And I feel that as a hospitality industry, we need to find a common output to a global crisis. And I think COVID has shown that this was a global issue, but we're all dealing with it on our own. And there was not really a hospitality lobbying body strong enough to actually advocate for the same things. We've all tried to sort of muddle through this our own. And it's very important that with climate change, we recognize this early, because it's happening now. And it's not going to go away in 12 or 18 months. It's only going to get worse.
Daniel.
Well, I think that we're all aware that this is going to be a domestic market for the foreseeable future. So I would say communicate, and positively communicate with our guests, with a whole area of prospective guests, with our staff, with our travel agent partners that have not looked domestically previously, with media partners that are looking for new things to talk about, and with each other, with our fellow hoteliers, that spirit of camaraderie. But I really think it comes down to constant communication with all of those constituents.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I think that's all the time we have for this very important discussion. I think if we could, I would ask all of you to make yourselves available via email for any questions that our audience may have, because I suspect they will. My thanks to the International Luxury Hotel Association, and especially to our panelists for this enlightening and informative discussion. You've given our audience a great deal to think about, but I think most importantly, you've given them a reason for optimism, to stay the course, and realize that we can transform adversity into opportunity and make a difference during this most difficult time. Thank you all very, very much.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthew.